Welcome to Adapted, the podcast where we discuss adaptations of various forms. My name is Tom, and with me is...
Pat.
This week we're discussing Gerhart Hauptmann.
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 I'm going with Hauptmann.
Yeah, I think you're right. Hauptmann. Hauptmann, who was born in 1862 and became a major figure in German naturalism and surrealism and other theater things. He was a big deal in German theater. He was the most produced playwright during his lifetime in Germany. He was born actually in Poland. It was the part of Poland that was in Prussia at the time. He struggled in school, married his brother's wife's sister, who funded his studies with the University of Jena. And then when he dropped out of that, she funded his trip to Rome to become a sculptor, which also failed when his giant German warrior sculpture fell over. Then he went back to Germany, and then she funded his studies of playwriting at the University of Berlin. And then that eventually became successful.
I just love that his statue fell over.
It just collapsed, and that was the end of his sculpture career. So anyway, here we go. He came back.
Thank God it fell over. What would we have done without him?
This is going to be a punchy episode, audience. We did not enjoy this play. His first play was Before Sunrise, premiering in 1889, and it kind of launched the German naturalistic movement. Even though there's some arguments about actually how big, substantial, or long the German naturalistic movement is, which I'll discuss a little later, but he gets a lot of credit in the criticism for that. He wrote a number of plays after that. Most of them were big hits. The Weavers of 1892 uses some sort of social consciousness and initial ingredients of what later we might call epic theater in order to show the problems and woes of these Silesian weavers, as the title implies. Less than a year later, his most famous play, The Assumption of Hanau, premiered in Berlin. But it became much, much more famous in 1896 when it became part of the first season of Konstantin Stanislavski's Moscow Art Theater. And if you know Stanislavski, he is basically the OG when it comes to modern acting techniques, and the Moscow Art Theater was his laboratory. So that was a really big deal. The production was also eventually banned in 1898 in Russia after, for some reason, protests from the Russian Orthodox Church. They premiered in
Which I
America.
don't get. I have no idea what they were protesting against.
There was a lot of, I don't know if they were protesting against the play or they were protesting against him. He had a reputation for putting things on stage that were inappropriate. He had in Before Sunrise, he has it's a play in which birth is discussed, which apparently was like the details of somebody giving birth, and that was considered radically taboo. And I think he had this kind of social conscious avenue to his work that ruffled a lot of official feathers. But he also was popular in America. He premiered this play in the Fifth Avenue Theater in 1894, which was followed up in 1910 in the Lyceum Theater. So this play had like a real international appeal. But anyway, getting back to kind of his significance in the theater movement and in German theater, which I don't know how much our audience knows about German theater. At this time, it becomes really important.
No one knows anything. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I mean, obviously people do know something, but 1890s German theater. I don't know. I mean, the only play I know from this time period in German theater is Spring Awakening, not obviously the musical, the real play,
The Vindican.
which is a much more interesting than the musical.
Yeah, that is a very interesting
But
play.
that's the only thing I know from this time period, other than this.
Yeah,
And Wiedekind's great. I mean, Wiedekind's great.
Mhm.
I will not take away from that, but
Yeah, there seems to be something going on at this time. And the person I was looking at to give credit to the scholar I was looking at was Ludwig Lusson, who was looking at naturalism in theater. And if our audience doesn't know what naturalism is the examination of human behavior through the lens of evolutionary science. So there's sort of rules of society that are an extension of what happens through evolution, and supposedly naturalism looks at human behavior almost like it's a laboratory, like the theater is a laboratory. And Emile Zola was the big name to start this. To start this off, even though if you think Emile Zola's plays are anything like a laboratory, you're out of your mind. But anyway, so this comes to Germany um, in Ludwig Fulda's play Das Talisman in 1892, and it seems to have really taken off. However, by 1895, there was a really kind of what we call an anti-positivist movement. Positivism roughly referring to rationally true claims made by science. It's more complicated than that, but I'm sure as hell not going into it. And by 1895, there was a lot of attacks from Nietzsche and Anatole France on positivism. And this seemed to have a downstream effect on the influence of naturalism, both in France and Germany. Out of this attack on naturalism, we start to see playwrights like Maeterlinck, who we covered a few weeks ago, Ibsen and Strindberg, who started to work in dreams and symbolism, that type of theater, with tendencies towards romanticism. There seems to be a refreshing of Goethe and playwrights like that. While Hauptmann started his stage in life in naturalism, plays such as Hanal, the play we're covering this week, it kind of marks a change or a compromise really between the exiting naturalism and the entering symbolism slash expressionism slash surrealism that would come to dominate the theater later on. Hauptmann's early dramas are drawing more from naturalism. He really does seem to have liked Zola quite a lot, but he sought other influences later on. But he's also really weird because there is another playwright from the 1830s, George Buchner, who is one of the original experimentalist writers, and not just in Germany, anywhere. And Pat, you know Buchner probably better than I do,
I
certainly.
love Buchner. Yeah, I really like Buchner.
Yeah, Buchner is he's a great playwright, and he was lost. But I don't know if he even produced during his lifetime.
I think Leonce and Lena was.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Leonce and
Yeah.
Lena was, but certainly not Wojciech. Wojciech wasn't finished.
Never, and yeah, Wojciech was never finished. It's probably his most famous in part because of the Berg opera that came later. But but
Have you ever seen the opera?
I've heard it. I've
Yeah,
not.
okay.
I've not.
Yeah,
Yeah, I really like it. It's
it's
really
really good.
pretty. Yeah, it's
It's
really
really
good.
good.
But so but Buchner was more or less forgotten. He died as a very young man. I think he died in
It's like 23,
1836.
24 years old, something like
Yeah,
that,
basically.
ridiculously young.
And so what happened was just kind of forgotten. And there's a group of people who sort of rediscovered him. And Hauptmann was part of that. He gave a lecture to his sort of intellectual society on this unknown playwright, Buchner. And if you read Buchner and you read Hauptmann, at least what we looked at, man,
They're,
there's
no, they're nowhere
nothing alike.
they're nowhere near each other.
The one thing I could say is with the Weavers, I started reading it and I put it down. There is a sort of what we're calling epic theater, and we should probably define that to say there's some similarity there. And epic theater is sort of it tends to look at social problems, but it tends to jump from scene to scene to scene without necessarily worrying about how each scene attaches to another scene. So you end up getting a very broad slice of life, both either a broad slice of society or a broad bit of time. And the effect of that tends to look at society more broadly. Um, I would say that Buchner certainly is working in that way. Wojciech is just, to a certain extent, you can put the Wojciech scenes in
In almost any order,
many
yeah.
orders and it still makes sense. It's not a therefore play, it's a and play. Um the Weavers isn't quite like that, but it does have some of those elements of we're just going to jump over here to these people and see what happens. There's a little more causality, but maybe there's something there to say, but it's just a weird time because this guy is like I don't know the broader connection between Hauptmann and Buchner. They seem utterly different writers, except for that element.
I mean, I think they're the only thing I can think that's common between them is that they're looking at no, like everyday, quote unquote, everyday people. This is not tragedy in the sense of looking at the epic fall of an individual or great people. That I think would be the thing that sort of joins them at least content wise. Stylistically, they're totally different. But I would say content wise, that's where they would be sort of naturalistic in that sense. And you see that in art that there's a movement away from sort of the doing grand pageantry and scenes of classical mythology or history and this kind of stuff. And there's a tendency in the mid to late 19th century towards what would be called essentially naturalism. Let's show peasants in the field kind of thing. There is a movement, I think, towards that, and I think that's where they're coming in. Wojciech is a soldier, and he's not a general. He's not important. He's in fact probably the worst soldier and the weakest soldier, and it's basically just him with his wife who is sleeping with people all around him and his kid, and he loves his kid, and he's forced to go through all these ridiculous experiments like eating peas, which I always love, and that's that I guess is the commonality is that they're portraying the common man. It's just that Wojciech is sort of exploring it in this really weird, semi-surrealistic way in which Wojciech is kind of the only character, maybe his wife as well, and everybody else is
The
just sort of
drum major.
the drum. Oh, that's right, it's the drum
The
major.
drum major sleeping with the wife. Yeah.
And the drum major's with the wife. And so there's this sort of sense that Wojciech is a real character, and these other people are just, the surgeon, the doctor who's feeding him the peas and this kind of stuff. All the different people are just sort of types, and that sort of I guess there's no sentimentality there. What's happening to Wojciech is sort of social forces that are just operating around him, and he's barely aware of what's going on, and there's no sense that you're meant to sort of like weep with voice check. That's not what you're meant
No.
to do here. Whereas this thing is very clearly, at least the assumption of Hanil, I'm saying Hanil, am I saying, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah,
But
sounds good to
however we're
me.
going to pronounce it,
Anil sounds good to
yeah,
me. Yeah.
however we're going to pronounce it, but the assumption, this play it's the classic of you're meant to watch it and go and you're literally your stereotypical 19th century bourgeois audience was meant to leave and go, oh, the poor people, how hard it is for them, let's throw a kopeck to them on the way out the door. I mean, that's and then they have their weep and their cry, and then they go home to their lovely loverly decorated homes, and they have a good weep, and then they think how they are such good people. We're such good people because we watched that sad play. And that's sort of what you're meant to go through. I mean, this is like a barely a step removed from the little matchstick girl. It's just you're just meant to have a good cry over it and go home. And that's what's just so grating about it. It's just so irritating just to because you can see the smugness of the of the people who watched this and their feeling of now we know what it's like to be a poor person. They don't shut up. That's
Yeah.
that's why it just so irks me as to the just sad sentimentality of it. And it just it bothers me for that reason.
Yeah, I will say one of my favorite things is I was looking at the life of Stanislavski, a book about Stanislavski, and because they covered this play and they mentioned it, and there was in the initial read through the play, it was the funniest description. It says everybody in the cast cried except this actor who played the Angel of Death, and I love the idea of everybody crying, and this one guy's like,
You're like, oh,
do not write down that I was crying. If you're
yeah,
going to say
I
everybody
am
was
not
crying, say except me.
me.
Do not drag me down. Like I love that. I wanted to go like, what? how did they get but blah blah blah? It was
Someone
so
noted it.
funny.
And you
Yeah.
know it was meant to be. I wonder why it was meant. Was it meant to be that he was stone-faced, or was it meant to be, well, because he was playing death, he could not weep.
Yeah, or he
He
just thought
had
it
to,
sucked.
or
I
whether he
don't
just
know.
thought it was stupid.
I didn't
You
have
know,
any information. Yeah, they didn't I didn't get any
I wish I knew
detail
a
on
little
that.
more about the man. I want to
Yeah.
know more about that man. That's the man I want to know about.
Yeah.
I want to know who he was and what his deal was. Because yeah, it's like what it's so clearly that's what it's meant to be. It's
Mhm.
meant to be a weepy weepy play. And you know, it's and I remember I've seen so many of these you know, in theater over the years, there's still a thing, you know, the plays, and they're meant for everybody to go into, and then they cry and weep and stand, and they give their standing ovations, and they clap, 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 clap.
It's pretty bad nowadays, or a few years back.
Yeah, I would agree. There was a lot of them, you know, just floating around out there. I remember seeing someone. The only time I've only almost walked out on a play once in twice, but one of them was a play where I would have walked out, but I was literally it was like the longest row, and I was in the middle of the theater in the middle row, and there must have been like 20 people on either side of me. I'm like, if I get up and walk out of this, there are 20 people. I'm gonna have to walk. I'm gonna have to shuffle by 20 people. I'm like, I can't do that. I'll just put my head down and just keep my mouth shut. But it's just these they're meant to and everybody stood up and clapped, and as they
Mhm.
walked out they talked about how sad it was, and these are just the places where I'm like, ugh. And then you know you go home and you feel so much better because you watched sad people suffer, and I find that just to be utterly manipulative theater. And you know films do it too, and they're just manipulative. They don't make you see anything that you didn't already know or you shouldn't have already known. They don't make you understand anything. They don't change how you're going to behave. They don't do anything except make you feel better about not doing anything because you feel better because you saw this thing. And so now you understand it. That's why these things just irk me. And that's what this play feels like. It's just a play about a little girl who's beaten by her alcoholic father and she dies in the snow. And then she dies of a cold, and you know we get to see her go to heaven, and that's like where she's finally accepted by the angels, and you're just sort of like, it's such an irritating piece of drama.
Yeah, I mean, the one blessing is you could read it in about 20 minutes because,
Short, yeah.
yeah, nothing happens really dramatically.
The only other thing I will say that I did like about the play, I thought it was going to be more interesting, is the man is a decent playwright. Like he can craft a play, and the opening is actually quite fun.
The
Like in
Yeah, there's a feeling of Ibsen made scene
Yeah.
almost in that
Yeah,
opening scene.
exactly. It feels like an Ibsen made scene. Yeah.
Yeah, or even like O'Neill, because there's sort of lowlifes running
Yep.
around this boarding house type
Yep.
thing. And I agree with you. I like that, and I wanted those characters to come back. I
Because yeah,
was
in the opening, just to set it, so what happens is before the little girl has been found dying in the snow, yeah, it's just these sort of riffraff. Like it's just a bunch of people who are clearly lowlifes. They literally are like they're talking about how they're stealing outside, and then they come in with all the stuff that they've stolen, and then they start stealing from each other. And then and then they're each like even the ones who are supposed to be like these two were like lovers, and the one of them stealing from the other one, and the other ones are laughing at how the one lover is stealing from the other. You know, and it's that sort of thing where these are all just lowlifes talking about how they're scamming people and then scamming each other. And that was actually it's an interesting dynamic to watch all of those figures sort of running around. And I actually thought, ooh, this is interesting. Yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about it. It does have like an Eugene O'Neill feel to it of, oh, I wonder what these guys are gonna do here and what's gonna happen. And then they come in with the dying girl and they all scatter and you never see them
You don't
again.
see
I
them
think that
again. Yeah.
yeah, they're just meant to be like add color to her death
Mhm.
so that her death seems even sadder because she has to die amongst all these horrible people. Like but that's it. I mean, that's their only
Yeah,
function,
maybe
right?
it. Yeah, I mean, my more generous reading, though it might not be justified, would be that it reveals the social classes or something like that. But I think you're right though, because you have Sister Martha, is that her name? And then you have Gottfried, the school teacher.
The school
So
teacher, the music teacher. Yeah, is
the
he a music
music
teacher?
teacher
Yeah.
is something. But they're the good people who deal with the poor, and she's a good poor, the girl, Hanil. or whatever is and I guess those are like the bad poor. So you don't even get, you're right, you don't even get sympathy for the interesting people. It's you have to be poor and you also have to be like angelic,
Yeah.
basically. Um so
And
anyway,
it's hard for the angelic poor because they're surrounded by all these bad
mm,
poor.
yeah.
Like that's it. Like I guess
Yeah.
that's what that's what you're supposed to get out of it.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe one time. So she does attempt suicide, right? At the beginning, she tries to jump in
Yeah, she
a
tries to jump in the
pond.
river, yeah, because the
There,
pond or whatever, the frozen
yeah.
pond, yeah.
There's one thing I thought might have potentially also been interesting was she asks if she could, if there's a sin so bad that she won't be able to go to heaven. And they're kind of like, no, it's fine. And I thought what they were going to do, or this writer was going to do, was something with like, suicide. Suicide's a
Yeah.
sin of despair. That's it. That's you're not supposed to go to heaven in a lot of Christian cultures through suicide. And I thought they were going to do something with that where that would be interesting, where it's just kind of like, yes, you're poor and desperate, but that is a sin past which you cannot get forgiveness or something like that. And they just kind of drop it,
Yeah, it's kind of
just
introduced as an element
mhm.
and it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, because she's talking with the sister about that. Sister or the school teacher or something. And I
I
thought
think it's the
that
nun. I think it's the sister.
it's the nun. Yeah, okay. And I thought, oh, that's interesting because now this woman, the sister, is in a position where she's like, "Uh, yeah, I really don't want to tell her that this what you did is or what you attempted is really, really bad. Because I want to comfort her, but it just doesn't
No, just kind of
not
shows
pick
up
up.
and then it's
Yeah.
again, I think it's supposed to be like the sister is nice to her and
She's a
then
good person.
she's a
Hmm.
good person and then they move on.
Hmm. Yep, that's now it's time for fantasies and gnomes and crystal coffins.
Yeah, she gets her, yeah, and then it's yeah, she has a dream of her ideal death where all of her friends from school come and they weep and sing a sad song that the schoolmaster teaches them and they sing a sad song about her dying and so she sort of gets to have a dream of her ideal death, I guess. And then she does die. And then she dies and
And she's
then
a dead person.
the play ends.
Yep, and then you go.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm like, oh, I guess that's it. There's just, again, you're meant to have a good cry and
Mhm.
then go home.
Yeah. So the play isn't very good. It's such an interesting intersection because there is this sort of social consciousness thing that's supposed to be that is there.
That
Like,
is, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's there, but it's ineptly handled. As they say, it's there, and I guess it's better than, they are attempting, or he is attempting, and I think there are other writers at the time who are sort of looking and saying we shouldn't just keep doing these grand, plays and, Shakespeare and this kind of stuff is great, but we need to explore real life. And this is theoretically what they're doing. I think they're just doing it in such a way that they're not actually they're manipulating it. They're using the suffering of others to make the audience feel good about feeling bad.
Hmm.
Like that's
Yeah.
that's what you're meant to do with it. You're meant to see horrible people and suffering of innocent people, and you're meant to think you're a better person for crying at it. Like that's what I think these are. So you're right. It's an interesting attempt. They're sort of they think they're doing something good. They're sort of attempting to do something good, but it's not so much holding up a mirror to society and making it see all its warts. It's just sort of like I don't even know what it's trying to do. It's a Narnia of suffering or whatever you want to call it. It's this fantasy world that yeah, it's a bourgeois
It's
vision.
effectively a bourgeois vision. What I found interesting about this person, though, at this time is in him, possibly completely incompetently, though, is an intersection of a bunch of theatrical transformations that are going on at this time. In the movement to surrealism, or more of his expressionistic work, excuse me. You could kind of see that in this play. You could see the naturalism from which this play is moving, this play is moving away from naturalism, but you could see that inheritance in it. And
Yeah,
you could also imagine like the Moscow Art Theater doing this and trying to ground it in realistic and modern acting, modern for that time, modern acting techniques. And then you could also see where somebody like Bertolt Brecht, the German playwright who comes along in the 1920s through the 1940s, who really developed the epic theater tradition, where he would look at this and see both what repulses him, but also what might be a possibility for his own style. And you can also see kind of like the romantic kind of impulse in it, which goes all the way back to Goethe. It's just, it's a really interesting experience reading about this guy and reading this play because it's such a bad play, but it's just like right at the point where all of the threads of the cloth are hanging. And
Yeah,
so
I mean,
so
you're right. I mean, that is a very generous read of what's going on, and I would agree. I think you're right. There is a lot of there's a lot of interesting theatrical trends that are sort of going away and that are emerging into the 20th century. It's yeah, that is definitely true. It's just they're handled in such a melodramatic and sentimental way as to be sort of repulsive.
And I just wonder how, another thing I was wondering is, have we gotten away from this? I mean, this seems completely incompetent. And as you're saying, probably not. I mean, we're probably still doing this type of thing.
I can think of a lot of plays
I
that
could
do
think
it
of a
now,
lot
yeah.
of plays. I was going to name one, but maybe I shouldn't.
It's
It's
just
a
going to
bad
anger
idea.
people because as soon
Yeah,
as you
yeah,
start naming the names of these
yeah,
plays, like that I
exactly.
think are just trash, but
Hmm.
it's so many people will go and say, but it made me cry. It was
Hmm.
so sad. And I'm like,
Hmm.
that's the problem.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and yeah, I think it's a very common trend. I mean, good theater is troubling and challenging. I mean, if you watch really good Brecht, it's hard to know what to think when you leave. Like really good, we've talked about this, and I totally agree that this is something that Brecht probably saw and went, there's a grain there. He likes the social aspect of it, but with the big thing that Brecht says that he hates is the sort of everybody has a good cry and they go home. He wanted to create theater that with a political purpose that would, when you left, it would cause you to want to change the world. That's what he thought political theater, that all theater he thought should be political, and that it should cause you to want to leave and change the world. So that's what he thought he was doing with his theater, was to get people out of the sort of weepy thing and to, as I think he said, it's like he wanted you to watch a play like you're watching a boxing match. You should really enjoy it, you should have fun with it, you should be invested in it, but you should watch the ideas fight one another and see who wins, kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
you're
so
not empathetic with the fighter.
no,
You watch a boxing match, and unless they get hit in the balls, you don't empathize with the fighter. You
no.
root for the fighter. That's a very different thing.
Yeah, whereas this you're not really rooting, yeah, you're crying along with them. And so I think there is something really interesting that Brecht sort of has going on there. But if you watch really good Brecht, and Brecht is really hard to do well, you can see there's a lot of really bad Brecht out there. But if you watch really good Brecht, you kind of leave and it does. I don't think he actually was ever successful in what he said he was setting out to do. I think he honestly was just too good of a writer, that his sort of his political ideas just couldn't get them, I don't think, to work the way he wanted to because he's just such a creative writer and director. He's just too good
It's too
as an
much
artist.
fun.
Yeah, he's too
His
much fun.
plays are so much fun, and not only that, you can take all of those elements and put them in a non-political situation and also have a tremendous amount of fun.
Yeah. But when you leave, you sort of you don't quite know how to think about them. I think a lot of the time, if you leave, say, Three Penny Opera, and you get that wonderful Deus Ex Machina at the end, and it's hard to know what to think about Mac the Knife. You are rooting sort of for a murderer the whole time, and sort of being like, oh, I hope he doesn't get his comeuppance for the man who keeps murdering people, and it's funny, and that's sort of the joke of the whole thing. And then again, you're meant to leave it sort of and go, huh, that is how unjust our world is. That in an unjust world, the murderer becomes the person that's good. That's the problem in an unjust world. Or Caucasian chalk circle, you have a similar thing with Azdak. You sort of have these weird things. You don't quite know how to think about them, and you really have to ponder them and put the pieces together. And there's no, this is an aporia. You're not meant to have a definitive answer in it, but that's what good theater will do. The best example of that I've seen in recent years, it was a really very Brechtian play, and it was a musical that I saw in London called London Road, and it's about dealing with how people deal with drug addicts and poor people and prostitutes in their town. And basically, in the play, this is true. It was based on a true story. Basically, there was a serial killer started going around and started murdering prostitutes, and the whole thing is the town doesn't know what to do because suddenly all the prostitutes are gone. They're sort of happy about that, but at the same time, there's a murderer going around killing people, and they're sort of like, they have a number of points where it's you have these people be basically saying, "Well, we're glad we got our town back, but." I mean, I wish we hadn't had to kill them. You can sort of see this sort of weird dynamic going on. And it's a very powerful play. And it does actually make you leave thinking, huh, I feel like I should do something, or I have to think about my attitude towards the world differently because of that, because of what you saw in that play. And they still do. And I've watched it a few times when I was in London. It was the only, when I lived there, it was the only thing I went back to multiple times because it's really good and it's very hard to watch. But it's not manipulative in any way. You're not kind of leaving thinking like weeping about something and then just going home. And that's why Brechtian theater at its best, it really makes you ponder something about yourself. This doesn't do that. Hauptmann doesn't do that. But you're right. It's interesting to see how these pieces are coming together in him.
It is, yes, and it's just German theater is just so kind of wonky. It's I taught once a class on the Gottlieb Lessing play Nathan the Wise. I There's no way you've heard. I wanted to do a sort of trajectory of plays that showed how kind of social awareness plays and melodrama go together and
Yeah.
became kind of the fodder of the poor. And Nathan the Wise was this German play, I think from the 1780s,
Oh, so it's really early. Okay.
really early, yeah. And it's about sort of religious tolerance, like tolerating the, Jewish character in this case, and how we should tolerate all religions. And it's a pretty melodramatic play, and it's pretty bad too. And I regret teaching it, certainly. Um, but you could see a trajectory from that to like the American plays of the 19th century, which are all like Gaslight. If you know Gaslight, that was a play where the about the poor and things like that. That's the meme of the woman being tied to the railroad track comes from that play.
Oh, I've that's where I've heard of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Or not yeah, Lamplight, excuse me, Lamplight.
Lamp. That's I was like, it's not Gaslight,
It's not
but yeah,
Gaslight, it's Lamplight. The
Gaslight's the one that
movie where
everybody talks about now. The movie with the woman who gets yeah. That's okay.
gaslighted.
Yeah.
Yeah. But but it's a lot of this stuff was kind of like what you're talking, it's not just emotional manipulation, it's also special effects manipulation because you could get a bunch of people to like weep. You could also, if you sold tickets cheap enough, you get a bunch of people in there and you just have the first special effects that come out around here. And so there's this whole like conscious social justice thing that's being completely that I should say it this way. It introduces the tearjerker as well as the special effect thing, the
Hmm.
kind of what and nowadays I guess would be in contemporary film, the CGI flush or whatever that is. But what survives out of these kind of social problem plays are those things, the tearjerker and the special effect. And you could kind of see this play also as somewhere in that conversation in some way. Um, and so, German plays are kind of they're sort of odd because they start with like Lessing, who wrote that, and Goethe, who has, you've read Faust. Faust is like out of its mind. It's unstageable and it's also just it's completely weird and different. And then it ends with Brecht. There's just something with the Germans at this time where they're like, we'll try anything new.
Yeah, I mean they do some wild
Yeah,
they
yeah,
do
do
some very
wild
interesting
things. Yeah.
theater. And I
Mm.
don't know if it's there was less commercialization of the theater than say in Paris or London where you've got the Garrick and Kemble's sort of marching around and making lots of money on the stage. So maybe it's those types of figures are not going to perform in a sort of wild play about a little girl dreaming that she's dying and going to heaven in a crystal cask. That's not Kemball's not going to do that in 1780, but you can sort of do some more. You can get more experimental stuff in Germany because it's a less established theatrical community.
I
Maybe I don't
don't
know if that's
know.
true.
Yeah, I mean, there's some experimental stuff in England earlier on, like pre 1750. Like if this is really deep dive, but if you do like Henry Fielding plays before he became a novelist, before he
I
effectively
didn't know
banned
he
from the
didn't know he
theater,
wrote plays.
he wrote really interesting plays. He has a play called The Author's Farce, which is effectively like David Lynch meets Saturday Night Live. It's the weirdest thing, but it's really cool and really interesting. And there's a lot of plays like that that are just like, what
It's like a David
this
Ives
is
play.
kind of, yeah. It's just bonkers, you know. And so there's a lot of those plays. I think once you get into the age of Garrick, it's not as fruitive, right? You know, the late 18th century in England. While it seems to be in like Germany, maybe this is where things get interesting, but it may also be just the case in the late 19th century for whatever reason, theater gets just really cool. Like
Yeah,
the different movements in theater, where if it's Germany or Russia, it's
or Norway
or Norway, yeah, Norway certainly,
Even it's Denmark. Strindberg's from Denmark, right?
Sweden, right?
Is he Swedish? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
bad.
That's fine. But yeah, even there, like, but they're sort of in conversation, I think, at this point, because they are, it seems like this guy, Hauptmann, is looking at Strindberg and Strindberg's looking at Zola, and they're all kind of looking at
And Ibsen's
Ibsen.
looking at Strindberg, and everybody, or
Yeah.
I guess everyone's kind of looking at Strindberg, or
Or
excuse me,
at
everyone's looking
Ibsen.
at Ibsen to some
Yeah, and
extent. Yeah,
everybody's looking at Bjornstjerne Bjornsson.
Bjornsson and Bjornsson.
Obviously, shouldn't be put that
I
in.
texted Tom totally unrelated, but I had this like collection of it's like collection of things for kids to read, and I'm like practicing reading with my kids, and I was looking through them, and I go, they have a selection here from Bjornsson and Bjornsson. Like, who in their right minds picked something from Bjornsson and Bjornsson? It was like, kids should read this. This is good for them to practice.
I should
I
say
loved it. I thought it was
I'm
hilarious.
I'm going to admit to a crime right now. I illegally downloaded the complete works of Bjornstjerne Bjornsson,
Ooh. Did
and
you read more?
I no, I after that podcast, I somehow put it aside. I don't know how I stopped myself from just indulging more, but I want to be on record of being, I think I'm the only person who has committed this
It
crime.
was piracy of Bjornsson Bjornsson.
Yeah, but
Um, but yeah, I mean, there is a lot of these guys are looking at each other, and there's really interesting stuff going on in theater in this period, and then it's going to totally explode, I think, into really interesting stuff in the 20s and 30s. That's when theater becomes really cool, and you start getting the really good, and that's when America starts really actually entering in on the scene. America doesn't do anything of note up to this point. The plays are terrible. But in the 20s, America starts really, in the 30s, America starts really producing good theater. And so you do have the sort of nascent seeds here, but there still is, as we would say. I mean, and I've never really liked that, when you just say like it was because of the bourgeois culture, it's just sort of like, well, that's weird to just dismiss it. I'm like, this is just such bourgeois culture. This is just like, this is the stuff you could just see and be like, oh, for the love of criminy, just be quiet. Like, this
yeah.
is, that this is bourgeois to just that sort of absolute dismissal of cultural achievement.
Yeah, I would agree with that. However, I would also say, in defense of the bourgeois, it is probably the fact that you could sell this play to lower working class people type thing is
Fair enough.
probably an indication that you're going to get a lot more money and have a lot more opportunity to do weird stuff. Right? I
Fair
think
enough.
there's a lot more just stuff being produced. So it's kind of like you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater type thing. Um, and maybe that's what's going on here too. I can't explain why theater becomes so cool at this time period. It's like 1600 and like 1900. Theater is just, there's just going to be a few decades at this point where things are going to the moon.
I mean, I think part of it, if I had to take a wild guess at least in the 1600s, it's because it's all pretty much brand new.
Invented. Yeah, it's
Yeah, it's pretty
invented.
much
It's yeah, like 1660, 1670s is when you have the first actual stages.
Yeah,
You're like, I don't
and
have
you
to
know, there's
wander around playing,
yeah,
playing
and
like
obviously, you know, the
Harlequin.
ancient cultures had it and created significant, you know, and for the most part they are fairly inventive, but it's different there, and it kind of dies out for a very long period of time, and yeah, you get some interesting theater here and there with, you know, some of the medieval mystery plays. Some of them are actually quite good and really interesting, but they're sort of special festival stuff. There's nothing
Mm.
really, as you
It's not
say,
an
there's there.
industry.
No,
You
certainly
need
not.
to be able to say, it seems like once you, maybe the similarity is this between like, let's say 1570 to 1620, 1630, and then, I don't know, let's say 1890 to 1930. You have two brand new markets
Yeah.
in both those instances. You have in England, you have your first like real urban market of people who have at least enough money to go to a theater. And then you have that like times 10 in places like London, Paris, Berlin, and New York in, those late years of the 19th century and early years of the 20th century. So maybe
And
it's
there
just,
is, I think, innovation going on in between there, but it's mostly in opera. Like, and I think that's where your theatrical energy was into opera. I think it's once opera I think is getting exhausted by mid to late 19th century, and that's when you really start to have a new emergence of a new urban, and opera is elitist. I mean, no matter how you're going to look at opera, opera is an elitist thing. It's not I mean, like, it is, I guess it does have an appeal to sort of a lower class. I think it did have a popular appeal, but I think it really is good. It's dying out in the 19th century. I think the sort of innovative approach. Now Verdi's still floating around. You do have some significant operas being written, but it's not where cultural energy is going by the late 19th century. The sort of performative energy is going into theater, and I think because it was sort of semi-stagnant for so long, you now have this just explosion of really interesting stuff that's going to come out of it. And
yeah.
there's new social pressures, you know, maybe that's also part of it. You know, as you say, this 16th century is a period of urbanization. That's when we really start having urbanization and international trade
And revolution
and
and
revolution. And so
how we
maybe
think see
that's,
the world. Yeah.
yeah, and that's fueling it in late 19th century is a lot of extreme urbanization and social pressures in a very different and sort of in a very different way. And I think that I feel like that's probably driving a lot of it too.
Yeah, it's interesting to think of opera as something, think of the development of opera alongside the development of theater. Because one thing to think about is actually something that Brecht based his Three Penny Opera off of was The Beggar's Opera,
Beggar's Opera.
which was the first musical. It was effectively the first musical where the writer John
Yeah.
Gay took popular songs, popular tavern songs, and put them on stage. And in part, that was competition with, or more like a middle finger to, the opera across the way. The Grand
Yeah,
Theater
fair
at
enough.
Drury Lane was, there was just opera. And so they're in that play making fun of like the Italian style and making fun of rich people who go to Italian operas who don't speak Italian and don't know what the hell's going on. And they're making fun of them and like, we're going to sing songs that people actually like. And that's this whole concept of like the earworm, the
Yeah.
song that you can't just get out of your head, like which has made Lady Gaga and Taylor Swift so many hundreds of
And
millions, if
many,
not
many, many
billions
of them hundreds of
of dollars.
millions of dollars
Yeah.
making their four chord songs or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But they're earworms and they speak to people who are like, I don't want to listen to Italian fat women sing but I can't afford it either. And so maybe that innovation in theater is in part like a- an appeal to a broad lower class people, and then out of that comes innovation. You're
Yeah,
just like, I'm going
that's
to
actually
appeal
a
to these
really
people.
that's a
Yeah.
really interesting idea because that is sort of what's going on with Shakespeare too, and that
Hmm.
is maybe that is what's going on. The sort of broad, you know, cultural forces when they are not coming from the top down, being dictated by a bunch of people who say they're going to recreate classical Greek tragedy, which is the origins of opera.
Hmm.
When you sort of and that does produce some really interesting stuff, but when you really want a revolution and you really want to change up, you go you appeal to the sort of lower class,
Hmm.
and then and that produces really interesting dynamic theater.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's Shakespeare. I mean, Shakespeare is
Yeah, it's
in
exactly
every
what Shakespeare
way
is.
like working class until he
Yeah.
becomes rich. But I mean,
But
he's
he becomes rich. That's a different story. But he becomes rich because he mass markets plays to,
Mhm.
yeah, as you say, the working class, the lower classes. This is not an aristocratic elitist theater. It appeals to them too, because
They
clearly he
pay
was
for
making
it,
money off that
certainly. Yeah.
too. But he was getting paid by them too. But it really is emerging from this sort of lower the as the every high school student has ever had to learn. It's all the groundlings, but that's where the popular appeal and creative energy is probably coming from. And I think there's something to be said, yeah, about that's what's going on with this emerging theater, which Hauptmann is sort of a part of, but in this in the weird, still bound to bourgeois sentimentality.
Yeah, he is the most performed playwright during his day. Oh, in German language
Yeah.
anyway. Well, I guess you could just say in Germany because there's and German and in his day. But there's a German country in his day.
There
So
is,
he,
yeah, there is a
yeah, for
German
the most
country in
part.
his day, but there's
Yeah.
also other countries that are speaking Germany, like particularly Austria, I guess, but that's really it.
Yeah, I don't know if he's the most performed playwright during his lifetime in all German language places or just in
Just
Germany.
in the new state of
I did
Germany.
not I don't remember
That
that.
that's a distinction we don't have to
Don't
worry
need to don't need to care about. Anyway, yeah. Like, who's the most performed playwright in Switzerland? Um,
about. German speaks it, so yeah.
the Luxembourgian translations were very popular. Yeah, so he is. I mean, he's an interesting figure in the sense of he's a his plays don't seem to deserve to survive,
Well,
but he seems to have a pulse on what the popular people want and a pulse on what the experiments are. And he seems to know how to negotiate that to make himself some money. Um,
fair
that's
enough.
that's interesting, at least.
Yeah.
That's good to know about, I would
I'm
say.
glad I read him because as much as he irritated me, it is informative to read the play. As you read the play, I think to your point, you can see I saw Brecht, but I agree. You can see all these other things in there. You can see Strindberg, you can see all these other, you can see Ibsen, you can see all the different threads being sort of in this one thing. And for that reason, everyone who's interested in theater history should read these plays so that they understand where things were coming from and the bridge I think that's there because that's what he feels like. He's that bridge between the naturalism of say Doll's House or something and the sort of more experimental stuff that's going to come in the 20th century. He's there. He's clearly if he's as popular as all these playwrights that we're going to talk about later, they'd all seen him, they'd all read him, they knew he was commercially viable, so they were probably basing some of their ideas on him as much as they were trying to make something new. So you got to assume they were very familiar with it. And for that reason, he should be read, but he should not be performed.
Yeah, he's a historical curiosity.
Yeah,
It's the difference between an artistic influence and a historical curiosity. He's a historical curiosity. You
yeah,
should read him to know that theater was not the sole product of people like Strindberg, who were just
yeah.
generating strange works of genius now and then. It's actually mostly it's probably closer to Marvel movies than it is to that.
Yeah, that's a good,
Should
good.
we should we turn to the film?
The film, sure, because it was
Yeah.
so much better, so much better. Spent 15 minutes looking for a sled. Just to get the girl out of the snow. I mean, it was absurdly long. I actually put it onto the two times speed at that point. I'm like, they're still looking for this sled.
So in the movie, there is I should give you one fact about this movie, which you'll be very happy about because you kind of I'll say you kind of called it. But just to get onto the sled thing, the first 12 minutes of the movie, I looked at the time signature, are them seeing the pond where the girl fell in. You can't see the girl because a bunch of people surround her, and then them
Yep.
trying to catch up to a doctor with a sled on on cinematography that it looks like when you take a picture of a mountain range with your iPhone because it looks so beautiful and then you show people and it looks completely flat because it's you don't know how to take a picture. That's what it looks like. It's the most uninspiring cinematography I think I've ever seen. Looks like my mother photographed it. It's just so weird. And it goes on for 12 minutes and they're just trying to get a sled. And you can see the sled. There's no
They're just
anyway,
following it. They're just
they're
running,
just
and then they keep
running
yelling, and
after
then
the
they fall
sled.
down, and then they have
Yeah.
to climb over a wall. Like,
It's
and
it's
then I'm like,
it's one of those things you're like, am I dying? What am I
why,
watching? Who
why
made
did anybody
this?
make this?
Yeah. But anyway, so Hanal Himmelfahrt is the hilarious
Which is
German
just, I
name
mean,
of
I
this.
know it means something different, and it's just
Yeah.
hilarious, though. Himmelfart is just such a,
Yes. It really was a Himmelfahrt.
yeah, it's just great. Good, good.
Uh, so I'm gonna see what you called, because you really called it. So it was made in
Oh, I thought you
19.
were talking about my 15 minutes thing. Okay. Oh, what
Oh
did I
no.
call?
No, this is what you called. So it was made in 1933 by Thea von Harbo. Do you know who she was?
I have
She only
no
made
idea who she
two
was.
movies. She was the wife of Fritz Lang and wrote
Oh,
the screenplay to M and
okay.
Metropolis.
So I said when I was watching this, I said to Tom, I go, at the ending, okay, that is really cool. So at the ending, when they, so at the, they have it, whatever, it follows the whole thing. There's the girl and she's dying and she imagines all this stuff and her alcoholic father who beats her and this whole thing. And there's the only thing that I really liked about the play about the movie is the ending, and they have this great, it's a really cool scene, right? I did actually like the Angel of Death. The Angel of Death was
The
cool.
Angel of Death scene was that was very Metropolis-esque.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I haven't seen Metropolis, so I can't say on that one. But there's this great scene where they walk in and the father is drunk and he stumbles by. I don't speak German, so it was a little hard to know exactly what they were saying to each other. But he walks by and he clearly sees Jesus lying on the ground outside, and he talks to Jesus for a bit, and Jesus seems to admonish him for something. And then he walks into the to where Hanil's body is inside the sort of crystal casket, and all the people are standing around preparing for her funeral. And they say, and then the people start and he starts getting upset and they start accusing him and they start yelling at him and you can sort of see. And I said, this reminds me, and this is what I'm assuming what you're going for, saying I said it reminds me of M. It's exactly like the scene at the end of M when he's being accused, when they're sort of in that abandoned warehouse and they're accusing him of the murders and he's sort of having that meltdown as they're yelling at him. And there's some really, really great sequences in that particular part of it where and they have like this weird like barking almost kind of shout thing that they keep doing at him. It's sort of this like wow. It's I don't know what they're saying, but they're shouting at him in this sort of. That reminded me actually of the in Harry Ape when they have the people's voices that sound like phonographs. It sort of has this very metallic quality as they're sort of barking at him uh, in this very accusatory style, and it reminds me of Fritz Lang and M. So I did not know that it was his wife. And that makes sense. That moment is a good, solidly structured scene, right? That's a well filmed scene. It's a well cut scene. They do it. It's got a good level of tension in it. It actually works very well as a scene,
Yeah, it does. The crystal coffins, it doesn't look particularly crystal, but whatever. The scene looks really nice. They fortunately cut the angel scene, which God bless them for doing that. But they do have the angel of death scene.
which is cool.
Their audience, there's two separate angel scenes. But the
And
angel
they're
of death
not
scene,
short.
yeah, no. But the Angel of Death scene looks really cool. It's also there's more of a montage style in that scene
Hmm.
where the sister who's taking care of our protagonist is next to her, and then they cut, and the two of them are in front of the Angel of Death.
Which is really cool and creepy that they bring the sister with her. It looks very eerie, and I'm like, oh, that's a cool. And again, those are cool sequences. Film did well with those.
Yeah, and you could kind of see the annoying stuff in the beginning as being almost hyper realistic, and this stuff stands out more by virtue of comparison. That's my generous interpretation of why the beginning sucked so much. Was there just
My interpretation was it's only an hour long movie as it is. This is a movie that needed to be a short film. This could have, if you'd really done this well, you could have made this. Somebody could make this into a decent short film. This would be an Academy Award kind of thing. This is where you'd get the votes because you did something sad, and so that kind of thing. It has that feel to it. But I think they were like, oh, we can't charge the people Deutschmark, we wanted to charge them if it's only 37 minutes long. We gotta pad this. And they're like, just have a guy run around looking for the sled
After a sled.
in the snow and we'll film
Watch a
that.
man in real time catch up to a guy on a
Yeah,
sled.
to try to catch a cab. It was like, like watch a man hail a cab for 12 minutes on Broadway and keep raising
I'm
his hand
sure
and
Andy
not.
Warhol did it.
Yeah. But
But
that's sort of the feeling that, that was the impression I got. They just needed to pad it. But they did have those sequences. It's very eerie. And I think the Angel of Death, the actor, doesn't really do very much, but he does look creepy and the costume is nice. And he just kind of stares. And particularly the fact that the sister goes with her, that it's a dream, but the sister is with her in the dream facing the Angel of Death. It's a, it's an eerie sequence. And that actually works. And again, those two sequences worked. Everything else was rather painful. Not painful, but just
not
not interesting.
engaging.
Not
Yeah.
engaging,
There
not
isn't a
interesting.
sense of stakes,
No.
right? There isn't a sense of stakes. That's
Well, does
the
anybody
problem
think
with
the
the
girl's
movie.
not going to die? I mean, it's in the
Yeah.
title, I know as well, but even if you didn't call it, the death of a sales Hanil, it still has this it has an inevitability, and there's sort of like, well, what do I care that she dies? You've told me, and there's no sense of as we would say this, yeah, there's no sense of stakes, there's no sense of scope.
I especially like the scene where she tries on a bunch of shoes to
Yeah, she tries on a bunch of clothing, they keep handing
yeah.
her clothes, and yeah,
Yeah.
the
I
shoes, I
just the
forgot about the
shoes sequence was real. They just keep editing. It's the you don't even see her take them on. It's like they just edit different
pairs of shoes,
shoes on
yeah,
her
because
foot together in
feet,
like a
yeah.
montage of. I mean, it came off kind of almost fetishy after a certain point.
There
Uh,
was a decent amount of this movie that I just kind of blocked out. I kind of forgot, but yeah, because she has to get dressed for her funeral, so they
yeah,
show
yeah.
her putting on
Will
different.
everybody recognize me in such beautiful clothing?
Oh, did they say that?
They say in the play. I don't, my
Oh, I was like,
German
I
is
didn't know.
not good enough
Oh,
to
okay,
pick
that's
up
what I
on
was
it.
like. Oh, I didn't know if you actually could understand the German.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, some, but I couldn't get within that they said that line. That's my favorite line in the play. That's that's not manipulative at all. That's
yeah,
just
no one, no
honest.
one will,
That's
no one in
honest
that
writing.
audience, yeah, would say, "Oh, the little girl is so concerned about her beautiful clothing." Yeah, and so the movie had those two sequences were good. I can now see where it came from because that's interesting. But as a movie, phew, it's not good.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just gonna go out on a limb here and say no for canon. No,
No,
no.
again, I think if you are interested in theater history, it's sort of like give him a read along, because it's important to know what was popular from a particular time period. It's important to know because whatever was popular, even the avant-garde people, for the most part, are still trying to earn a living, and so they're going to ape stuff from this as because this is how they can make money, and so they are going to do this to some extent. So for that reason, give him a read. Read some Ibsen, read some Strindberg, read Wiedekind because they're good. Read this guy to know what what got those guys to the next people, what got those guys to the Elmer Rices and the Eugene O'Neills and the sort of much more the Sophie Treadwells and the much more interesting playwrights that are going to emerge in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, it's interesting when you study anything, any kind of discipline, you look at the greats, and the
Yeah,
greats just aren't really representative of any kind of artwork that has a popular appeal. Any kind of
yeah,
artwork that has a popular appeal, typically, I mean, there's except, Shakespeare's an exception, obviously, and other people are exceptions, but they typically just don't capture what the what was going on at the time necessarily. Sometimes they do, but very often no. And I feel like this guy was capturing the energy of German theater at the time. Even though if you were to study German theater in, let's say a 300 or 400 level German class where you read theater plays, this guy's name probably wouldn't even come up. But he probably far more significant than in terms of what people actually were doing day to day. I mean, it's kind of, you only have so many years on this earth to read. So like you have to kind of make those calls. But if you're really, really interested in just the development of theater, right? If that's your thing, you want to know how theater came about, not just what's really good and artistically fulfilling. Yes, this is something to gravitate towards.
Gravitate towards. But if you just are looking for the great books, yeah, you can pass over. You can
Yeah.
pass over Gerhart Hauptmann.
Yeah. I read through the Nobel Prize acceptance speech, not the acceptance speech, excuse me, the presentation speech explaining why they picked it. And it was just, it was really, his work is really natural. It's really, really
No,
natural, is what they said a lot over and over again. It's, that's all that's all I got out of it. They even
I
quoted
don't
a
know.
few
This was their
lines.
sort of like apology to Ibsen because they didn't give it to Ibsen and they didn't give it to Chekhov. So it was like, well, we'll give it to the next great naturalistic playwright of our day, to Gerhart Hauptmann. I'm guessing that's the logic
Maybe
here.
that's the
I'm guessing that's
idea.
the
Yeah.
idea, but they
Hmm.
just failed because they missed the good ones.
Yeah. Well,
All right.
if you enjoyed The Assumption of Hanal or Hanel and want more Hauptmann adaptations, see Atlas, the Danish film from 1913, the three different versions of The Beaver Coat from 1927, 1937, which the 1937 one is apparently a Nazi-approved film, but there's also a 1949 one. We have the West German Before Sundown from 1956, Dur hit Angermann from 1959, and then next to this, his most popular film was probably The Weavers from 1927, which is a silent film. So look out for that. You can rate and review this show anywhere fine podcasts are available. For those viewing in YouTube land, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the Talking Studios channel for all our exciting content, and follow us on social media at Talking Studios. Check out other shows by Talking Studios, including Talking Pictures Trivia, where we explore movies through trivia, Keep Making Movies, where we explore micro-budget films, Limited Lexicon, where we play through text-based adventure games, and Get the Point, where we slowly reveal a movie poster and try to guess which movie poster it is. Got a question for us? Call the Talking Studios hotline at 201-467-8679 and leave a message. It may be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Adapt It, wherever fine podcasts are found. Join us next week when we discuss the 1913 Nobel Prize winner Rabindranath Tagore and his book Home and the World and its Satyajit Ray adaptation, Gare Bare. See you then.
Wow, Talking Studios.
Next week, we'll be discussing the 1913 Nobel Prize winner Rabindranath Tagore and his novel The Home and the World from 1915 and its Satyajit Ray adaptation from 1984. Pat, if you were hired to direct a new version of this work, or excuse me, hired to produce a new
Deuce. Yeah.
version of this work and had to hire the director, which director would you hire? You can't do Rye because he's dead as hell. So
Yeah,
I
I mean,
guess you're gonna
we should
find
be
someone
clear.
new.
Yeah, I mean, we should be clear. I mean, we kind of had joked about this when we right before we started this. Like, I don't think you'd get anybody different to do this because it's this movie shouldn't have another director based on what we saw of it. So I would go if I had to pick someone, I'd go with someone like Cameron Crowe, I think, because I sort of like the it. I don't know what it's again seeing in the 1984s. It sort of has this feeling of a movie that was it's a historical movie, but it's not a history we know that much about. Then especially most people in the West are not that particularly familiar with Indian history. So I feel like Cameron Crowe sort of has this way of taking this sort of nostalgia thing where he often does in things like Almost Famous or that kind of thing, and I think it could be something interesting that he could do with it. I don't think that's a particularly good choice, but you know what? I'm just gonna go with Cameron Crowe.
Cameron Crowe. Okay. So I have two. I have one that's kind of silly, which is Oliver Stone.
I was gonna say
Oh, were
Oliver
you gonna say
Stone.
Oliver Stone?
That
Yeah,
was one of my names, and I was like, "Oh, it'd be really funny if Oliver
it
Stone
would be
did this one."
so funny. It would
But
just
I had the
be,
exact same thought.
yeah, the conspiracy of the
Yeah.
guy dying at the end.
Oh,
Oh,
exactly.
it
That's
would be,
exactly what I thought. I thought
yeah,
it does have that feeling. It has a JFK feeling to it. I had the
yeah.
exact same reaction.
Yeah, I mean, if you put a JFK feeling into this, like a
Yeah.
JFK tone of hyper suspicion and conspiracy, I mean, it obviously doesn't work, but it would be so
No.
funny.
It would be funny, but
It
I
would
had
be
the exact same
hilarious.
humorous. I thought, well, I could go with Oliver Stone, but it's so insane. But I did have the exact reaction. So
Yeah.
there's something about it that
Mhm.
suggests apparently Oliver Stone.
Yeah, I guess it's because it's politically
Yeah, I think
complicated.
it's as politically complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. The other one who would be a little more reasonable, though not a great choice for this, would be somebody like Spike Lee, who Spike Lee
Oh,
has these kind of politically charged things, but often even the characters he's on the side of can also suck. So even
yeah.
characters who he agrees with them politically or feels kind of a racial kinship with them, they can often be lazy and bad and have problems.
Which is
And
the better way to tell a story.
yes, exactly. It's the better way to tell a story. So I think he would be an interesting choice.
Don't
Obviously,
think I've ever seen a Spike Lee movie, so I couldn't say. But
yeah, he's very talented. I mean, he has his problems, but that would be why. That would be my justification for doing Spike Lee. I think the sort of double barbed ideas that come in this film, he could potentially handle. Also, this idea of kind of racial or religious group affiliation and how that feeds in unexpected ways, feeds problems in unexpected ways, he could also probably handle.
I like it. I think it's a good choice. I mean, it's I'm not a political movie kind of guy, but I like the idea.
Yeah, I'm not a political movie kind of guy either, mostly because they're not very, it's
They're
not
usually
necessary.
not
They're not very
particularly
good.
good.
Yeah, it's that political side's version of a religious film. Like religious films tend to be pretty bad because they tend to do things like say you should go to church or be a good person, pretty obvious things. And then political movies tend to be pretty bad because they say things like you shouldn't be racist or you shouldn't be sexist, which,
Yeah,
if you're a religious person, you already know the first thing. And if you're just an observing person who has a IQ over 65, you know the second thing. So it becomes kind of just preachy in both instances. They're really hard to do well.